Hi, Dr. Vaughn. I did my videos and with my phone, but it kept on cutting every 11 minutes. I uploaded them though on Canvas, but it kept on cutting, so I could not fully say whatever I wanted to say without being cut, and then it kind of just got messed up. So I decided to do it with my laptop webcam so that it just becomes like a whole long analysis of the readings instead of cutting several times. Okay, this is Franklin's article on tourism and introduction. Franklin states in the introduction passage of this book that theories that exist in the study of tourism are not substantial and inadequate, and therefore calls for a new approach and new sets of theories that would assist in creating new theoretical perspectives to the ever-changing social constructs of the modern age. Franklin's main argument in his book is that tourism is an essential component of modern identity development rather than something perceived as superficial that occurs on the social border. Franklin argued that although tourism industry continues to constantly grow, there are disadvantages and negative outcomes, which begs to question why do people still engage in tourism. He listed such negative outcomes as exposure to germs from inadequate air supply in the aeroplanes to uncomfortable sleeping accommodations experienced by backpackers. Um, tourism in globalization. Franklin argued that tourism was created due to modernized society's quest to gain more general knowledge about the outside world beyond its locality. Franklin argued that initially societies were not open or welcoming of strangers, and anything that was not familiar was termed as unfamiliar and foreign to the people of that locality. The sense of fear was heightened and defined as the other. With the quest for more knowledge and applying tourism as the basis of exploring and creating new adventures, societies became connected due to universal discourses. Franklin argued that tourism is a neglected aspect of of globalization, and gives us example of how people who he gave us examples of how people, because the world is becoming a global place, people do not need to go out do not need to travel out of their areas to experience tourism. Rather, tourism comes to them in forms of meeting new people from different ethnic and social backgrounds. For example, I could meet a Thai Lyft driver, or I could go and experience new food in an Indian restaurant somewhere here in Denton without having to travel to India myself. He also used the internet as also a touristic site, because when we go on the internet we check, we see webs sites and menus for us to choose as the tourist what activity we want to do on the internet, or what we choose to do, what activities we choose to do on the internet. So the basic, I think what he was basically saying is that we do not have to, due to globalization, we do not have to leave our locality to experience tourism. um Tourism and everyday life. Franklin argued that tourism served as a metaphor for everyday life, as it is accessible to everybody. Initially, tourism was accessible only to the Western upper class, but with modernization, everyone can partake in it, as it gives room for freedom, accessibility, and democracy. Um, Franklin cites Thomas Cook here, who is the founder of modern tourism, as um, Cook expounds for tourism. expounds for is in support of how tourism should be accessible to different people of socio-economic class, and not only should it be to a select group of people. And it would help people to travel out and experience and have real experiences. He also said that people who do not travel outside their locality experience experience internal experience he said that for people who only gain tourism knowledge from inside their locality are missing out from experiencing are missing out from having real life experiences. Instead, he encourages that they should travel out so that they can learn and know that these cultures are not foreign. Um, in chapter 2, Franklin acknowledges Cook as, like I stated, as the founder of modern tourism. He argued that Thomas could foresee the value of tourism in the future as people who are educated sought for additional knowledge in fields such as politics and finance, and therefore tourism would be useful as it would break both the spatial and cultural boundaries. Franklin argued that other theories diminish the importance of tourism, especially in the socio-psychological field. Um, he stated that the theorists in the in this field um, view tourism as people who are looking for value in their life. Tourists as people who the theorists in this field saw view tourists as people who were looking for something in their who were looking for meaning in their lives, and therefore left the comfort of their homes to travel to somewhere else to find meaning in their lives. And they argue that tourism came out as a necessity of modernity. The modern world, according to these theories, are cast as unchanging and inorganic, in which Franklin sees as a wrong misconception because modernity is always changing. With the birth of modernity came tourism, which Franklin stated should be celebrated positively. Franklin argued that there is no historical framework for tourism, for how tourism came to be. Instead, he used he used nation states he used nation states as the founding model, as the founding models for tourism, as they are seen as tourism is seen as an important is considered as an important is considered as an important uh, part of nation building. It's also nations have created policies specifically for tourism, and tourism is seen in these nations as a way of generating finances. For example, in West Africa, all the countries that are along the West African coast, along the western coast of Africa, are all under a committee called ECOWAS. And in this association, all citizens from these countries are allowed to cross without an international passport or visa into these neighboring countries. There's an agreement by these countries that its citizens should are allowed free passage without international passports and visa to go into these other countries to do whatever they want to do, either business or tourism. And so with that, we see that boundaries are broken and cultures are explored, and we see tourism increased. because I use that as an example, especially of myself when I traveled to Ghana, and I'm from Nigeria. I went by road, and I passed two other countries, West African countries, on my way to Ghana. I passed the um the Republic of Benin and the Republic of Togo, and we didn't need visas to go through these countries in order to get to Ghana, and went there for touristic visit. So all, and in doing in this coalition of nation states, it helps to increase tourism, and tourism is important. um Different scholars have given different definitions of tourism, from Matheson and Wall 1982 to O'Reilly 2000. In these definitions, tourism is quantified in terms of the economy. The social sciences field did not acknowledge the importance of tourism, as scholars in the field viewed tourism as trivial and superficial. McConnell defined tourism as a deviant activity which emanated from the cultural disturbance of modernization. Post-Fordism is a term here discussed by Franklin, and it is basically described as a mass forms of production and consumption to the public. This approach also extended to the tourist industry, and it was applied by using different tour packages to appeal to certain types of um tourists. Tourism was tailored and packaged to meet the requirements of various lifestyle groups. Um, okay, my article on my Schaefer article. Okay, so Schaefer 2014's main argument is that backpackers perform a liminal rite of passage. The performer embodies the characteristics of the mystical traveler by using props, costumes, and scripts that are connected to the Western traveler. The backpacking is a liminal rite of passage for Western youth, which symbolizes passage from childhood to adulthood and also establishes their independence. Schaefer proceeds to discuss the differences between embodiment and authenticity using performance-centered approach to tourism by performance scholars. The scholar argued that both non-academic and academic theories can sense place through our bodies, which give us additional knowledge of which gives us additional knowledge. If not for this, it would have not been possible. Anytime we perform a touristic activity, anytime we do something touristy, anytime we do any tourist activity, we are actually embodying that process. Schaefer claimed that authenticity could not be identified in places and objects, but in the body, its interactions and context. For example, a backpacker always tries to create a difference between themselves and the individual tourist. For example, a backpacker tried to the backpacker thought that they can come across as authentic and or might have an opportunity to experience unexpected unexpected things when traveling across Europe. The independent traveler, which is the backpacker, had no time constraints, unlike the individual traveler who was always scheduled to perform one tourist activity or the other. This concept of authenticity can be categorized into three ideas. The main research concerns itself with the naive tourist who tries to practice on authenticity where it does not exist. The second, the other idea says that it does not. The other idea about authenticity means that um, scholars do not acknowledge authenticity because it means that if they do, they are also acknowledging power. Yeah, that also acknowledging power and authentication. And the third views authentication as a social construct that has a unique meaning to the individual. Performance study scholars support the light idea because backpackers perform an embodied experience. Schaefer affirmed that backpacking is a social construct because the backpackers perform features that are synonymous with backpacking culture and its participants. Schaefer proceeds to give an account of the two trips she took to Europe. The first was incomplete and the second trip was considered as completing the journey of exploring Europe in an authentic way. Schaefer gave a detailed narrative of their Harris of gave a detailed narrative of her research on what was required of a Western backpacker. The scholar noted that in carrying out research for the trip, several guidebooks exist in which target different types of tourists from there are several guidebooks exist which target different types of tourists from the rich to the middle class which did not fit well with ours which did not fit with our scholar. Our scholar instead our scholars philosophies of backpacking corresponded with that of Rick Steves, and in order to do it and she found that she before she even started the journey she was already performing an authentic she was already performing the tenets of what a backpacker should be. Rick Steves' book gave the scholar insights and advice on how to experience an authentic Europe. Schaeffer, however, argued that it was the guidebook sometimes became the guidebook's rules sometimes became rigid for her and she could not really have an experience of tourist activities. Schaeffer, however, still took some of the tenets of Rick Steves on how to be a Western backpacker by packing light with minimal resources and being on a budget. Schaeffer noted that the backpack was an integral part of the backpacking subculture and serves as a mark of identifier to other tourists and residents. She felt that when she felt according to her she felt when she she was carrying her backpack she had a role to play as a backpacker, but when she took it off she always felt that she could relax and be herself and she felt that she did not have any role to perform. She felt that she could be who she was without having to perform any sort of role. uh, the the scholar identified two types of tourists: the cultural two types of backpackers, the cultural backpackers and the leisure backpacker, and the scholar belonged to the latter. The leisure backpacker can be described as a person who was ready to socialize and using European locations as a place to meet and reconnect with friends. For example, graduates from universities in the United States travel to Europe as a way of gifting themselves for a successful graduation and also use that as a way of reconnecting with their friends too in the US. This group of people would normally belong to the upper class in the society, while the cultural backpacker is a person that embarks on an adventure to explore the sights and culture of Europe on a budget, which Schaeffer identified with. Schaeffer identified features of a cultural backpacker as taking photographs of monumental scenes or historical artifacts, journaling, and sending postcards, which are backpacking performances. Schaeffer noted that keeping journals helped to prevent boredom, as backpackers were always lonely during their adventure. However, after the adventure had ended and they were back home, the journals and postcards served as mementos of their experience. Schaeffer 2014 argued that these features do not conform to the normal tourist activities. Schaeffer found that the use of Steve's book came in useful at times. However, his opinion of certain landlords were never open-minded. Schaeffer suggests two touristic gaze applied by McConnell, where the powerful subject possesses the gaze, and to the viewing subject, not the object of the gaze, is manipulated and in the field of vision. The tourists are always aware of their performance as opposed to the first gaze, which is institutionalized. Schaeffer realized that in relying on Steve's guidebook and information from tourists, bo- from inter, from tourist booth, she was not performing the role as of the ideal backpacker. The real backpacker, according to her, socialized with fellow backpackers and ate food which was familiar to them, as opposed to experiencing and tasting the new food in their location. The real backpacker relied on safety in numbers and opposed to as opposed to the ideal solo backpacker. Um, she stated that authenticity was sometimes hard for her to achieve, but she did perform it, and she found authenticity when she ran into the when she came across the Sound of Music tour group. She At the end of the day, Sheffer argued that backpacking is an identity that is constantly negotiated and renegotiated depending on the individual and how they try to use their backpacking identity. Brunner 19 my other article, travel stories told and retold. Brunner 1995, in this introduction, gives us an insight into how tourism functions from the ethnographic and anthropological point of view of the scholar. Brunner gives us a historical account of how he had acted as a tour guide to American students and tourists across Southeast Asia. Brunner argued that from an anthropological point of view, he studied and observed the tourists who in turn were observing the culture and people of that location. As a tour guide, he was able to speak the language of the people and have a historical knowledge of the culture. Bruno was able to play dual roles of both answering inquiries while observing the tourists and giving them information of what he has studied about the people and culture of that area. However, in his anthropological study of however, in his Brunner discovered that not everyone shared his view of thinking critically about culture, tradition, and representation. For example, when Brunner acted as a guide for a tourist agency based in New York, he and the owner of the agency had varying views on culture and what could be defined as authentic. The Balinese dance group, which tour group, which the Balinese dance, which predates 1970, was created specifically for tourists in 1975. Brunner was trying, but during this, when the group of tourists witnessed this Balinese dance, Brunner tried to educate them by letting them know that bef- before witnessing this, that brother let them know that the brother let them know this this dance or this part of their culture had been existed for a very long period of for centuries, and that it was not created in a vacuum. However, however, his his boss at that time, Lisa, the owner of the agency, did not be however, Lisa, the owner of the agency, wanted the narrative of the dance being created as a take-home narrative for the tour group, and also she had money to make, and she had promised an educational tour of Indonesia from the perspective of an anthropologist. Brunner argued that this main narrative was and is still accepted within the tourism industry, which is that such performances are authentic and should not be questioned and should not be should be left unexamined by tourists. However, Bronner stated that critical thinking should be given to exactly what. However, Bronner stated that critical thinking should be given to exactly what tourist attraction represent and should be examined for what they are. According to Bronner, his main goal was not to apply simulacrum, examining these rituals, but to examine them as contemporary rituals used in a political and touristic meaning. And the meaning should not be only for the tourists, but for both the performers and agents who engage in everyday touristic performances. Bronner argued that in tourism performance, simulacrum does not exist, as culture is performed out of the local cultural model of the people, and culture is always changing, performance is always changing, and in terms of context and meaning, so also does the tourist change. um like Schaefer 2014, Brunner discusses the role black backpackers play in tourism. Brunner says that backpackers also compete for the same space as the individual tourists. The backpackers do not partake in any of the activities that the individual tourist engages in. Rather, they go around seeking for adventurous stories and taking pictures. Brunner argued that backpackers were not acknowledged or mentioned in ethnographic accounts of tourism. Um, stories and foreign goods. Brunner gives an account of what is domestic and foreign tourism. Brunner argues that one can make the difference depending on an individual's point of view. Brunner goes on to give examples of foreign tourism which can be a Nigerian traveling to America to see Disneyland, or traveling to New York to see the Empire State Building and the Statue of Liberty. Whilst a domestic travel can be a Nigerian from the Igbo culture traveling to the northern region of Nigeria to see how the Hausa people of that region practice their culture, and we can also look for similarities between both cultures. Brunner also argued that if the Igbo argued, for example, that the Igbo Nigerian who travels to the northern part of Nigeria to examine and learn the culture of the Hausa people can be perceived as a foreigner by the Hausa people, whilst the Igbo Nigerian would think that we are all Nigerians, and therefore I am not would be of the school of thought that we are all Nigerians, and therefore I am not considered a foreigner. Contested sites. Brunner described contested historical sites as places that have different meanings to different sets of people. For example, the Elmina Castle in Ghana has different meanings to both the locals and foreigners. To the locals, the castle serves as a reminder of slavery and man's inhumanity to man, and the sufferings of the black race by the Western world, and uh, and also as Elmina Castle is also seen as the gateway. Elmina Castle is also seen as the gateway to the New World. While for the African Americans, it serves as a starting point of finding their roots and a return to the motherland. While to the Westerner it serves as a symbol of shame and sins committed in the past. Brunner argues that in such situations there is a divide on who has the right to tell the narrative. Brunner argued that this is not a fixed model that makes either party in control of the narratives that are produced. Um, Home away and touristic border zone. Brunner defined the touristic border zone as special term where both the tourists and the locals come together. The tourists leave their hotel rooms and the locals leave their homes, and both parties converge at a pre-scheduled venue and time. Brunner stated that the tourists move from site to site and most of the time they never return. However, the locals always still stay there, and they witness streams of different tourists come every day. Brunner argued that the performance can have different meanings to the local and the performer. which is not initially stated at the beginning. But when both parties engage in a dialogic conversation in the border zone, a universal meaning of whose role as the viewer or as a performer can be established. Border zones, according to Bruno Appa, can be found anywhere, including in like international airports where a Nigerian cultural troupe does a performance whilst boarding their flight, to the admiration of both domestic and foreign travelers. Narrative and experiences. Brenner argued that the narrative is an essential part of the tourism commodity, and it is created in order to have meaning. The narrative has to be coherent and ordered for it to make sense to the listener. Brenner also stated that the meta-narratives are an important and large theoretical framework of tourism. Bresler also stated, according to Brenner, meta-narratives are not synonymous with any culture or thought, and their presence are never made aware of. Meta-narratives exist everywhere in tourism. For example, a group of Western tourists who visit the game reserves in Kenya and the Maasai people can be seen as reinforcing narrative stereotypes of power relations and colonialism. Brunner argued that the tourists engage in pre-tour narrative, that is like having an idea or hearing stories of the place you are going to see, and they soon should shape the narrative based on their experiences, and soon alter the narrative to their own version to make it coherent and remembered to them. Brunner defined touristic untold narrative as narratives which contain creative cultural content which are either hidden or removed. The new narratives which are accepted come in high demand by consumers and tourists as part of the politics of selection, according to Trullo 1995.